Alright, Chapter 5. Advanced Degree. Alright, Pac. Kiss me then. Pac and I are standing on my tiny black porch on Price Avenue, and the two of us are bantering about how maybe if we actually tried to be more than friends, could it work or not? And I decide to dare him. During our teen years, it wasn't really Pac's good looks that grabbed you, because his sculpted features and unforgettable handsomeness hadn't quite come in yet. What he did have, even in 10th grade, was pure, unadulterated charisma that was out of this world. What he saw in me at first might have been just that I was the cute, feisty girl in the room. For any curious male spirit, that's the first move, to want to know her name and see what's up. Basic. And yet all I can tell you is that our immediate connection, I felt, rose beyond the basics. And this is what made me want to get to know him. We became inseparable from the moment we met. We were kindred spirits in so many ways. And although Pac may have had an attraction to me in the beginning, the more time we spent together, the more we could both see that there was no romantic chemistry between us. At all. There were no airs between us either. We could be raw and authentic without the constraints of having to impress each other. You got what you got. There were no butterflies, no tingles in the body, no hot desire to be in each other's embrace. Rather, there was something far more important unfolding between us. A friendship of a powerful strength, giving us the ability to hold space for each other through some of the most unbearable moments of our lives. Being as young as we were and as tight as we were, we both found it confusing at times that we weren't drawn to each other romantically. Hence the day he got on my last nerve about the possibility of being more than friends, and I dared him to kiss me. Without hesitation, Pac grabbed me in his arms and did just that. The kiss lasted a few seconds before we both pulled away in mutual disgust. It felt wrong. Pac pulled back with his eyes all squinted as if he had drunk spoiled milk. He wiped his lips hard and said, "What the fuck?" I laughed my ass off. "See, I told you, dummy." It was literally like a sister and a brother trying to make out. All I knew, though, was that it was possible to really love a guy deeply without it having anything to do with sexual attraction. I had never felt that before. Pac made up for the lack of male protection and care I sought in my life. Unlike other guys who wanted to flash their jewels, cars, cash as their value, because Pac didn't have any of those things to display as his worth, he offered his mind, his care, and attention. Besides, I think God knew that if sexual attraction had been possible between us, we would have left each other in a special kind of ruin. Instead, God gifted us with a special kind of friendship. Now, our bond didn't come without its challenges and costs. We were both fiery, passionate, and dangerously stubborn. This made for feral fights. We didn't take each other's shit, and unfortunately, we also knew how to hurt each other like no other. Our tongues were the sharpest of swords between us. These fights could leave us not speaking for days, sometimes weeks at a time. But we always made it back. Always. But nobody could tease me like Pac. He knew how to get under my skin. He created a nickname to remind me that I wasn't as up on my game as I acted. It was brutal. He called me Square. For life. When I first met Pac, he owned one sweater, the same one he'd worn the day I met him, 2 pairs of pants, and a few shirts. That's all. Pac couldn't hide the reality of poverty in his life. Looking for an easier way of life, in part, his mom had brought him and his little sis, Setua, from New York to Baltimore. But it didn't sound like their lives had gotten much easier for them. As Pac and I grew closer, I got a clearer picture, and I learned that, like my mother, his mother, Afeni, struggled with addiction. Like mine, His environment was full of instability and chaos. We really bonded as the result of riding the same roller coaster with our moms, and both suffered the pains and disappointments that came with it. Unlike my mother, Afeni had not been able to secure work, which had only worsened their financial struggles. Pac never said so, but I could tell that getting to eat 3 meals a day was not a given for him, nor were shoes that fit or getting a good night's sleep. Between my regular jobs and cash I started to make in the streets, I always had some money in my pockets. To help Pac, I made it my business to ensure he was straight, but not on some charity shit. Pac was prideful. He had standards about what it meant to be a man and stood his ground on that, in spite of how he may have been suffering. If he was made to feel like I thought he needed assistance, he would refuse support from me, and in those instances, my heart withered watching him do so. Early in our friendship, I brought some clothes to school that I bought him, some shirts and a jacket, but I had to be careful. As I started to show my purchase to him, I went, "Yo, Pac, Gap was having a sale, right? So I was getting some stuff for myself, and then I saw this fly-ass jacket, and I couldn't help but see you in it. I was like, this would be fly as fuck on Pac." I held the jacket up against his chest. Damn, I was right. I remember the biggest smile came over his face as he grabbed the corners of the jacket. "Yo, you're not such a square after all. This is dope." He threw on the khaki jacket with pride. I had succeeded. His sis had simply thought about him, that's all, and happened to run across some fly shit she wanted him to have. Anything different, he would have made an excuse not to take it. If I was going somewhere to eat, I'd take him with me on some let's kick it shit with a casual flow. Whether it was TGIF to get a chicken box, cheesesteak subs, or McDonald's. We had late nights at Denny's and IHOP. Later on, when I was starting to really roll in the streets and was flush with cash, I even took Pac a few times when I went with my homegirl Fawn, Chet, and some other high-rolling hustlers to full-on upscale dinners at Pargo's, our spot after a good week. I'm talking about at least a couple of grand in my pocket. For the other players, it was a lot more. I didn't bring Pac around often because I didn't want to pull him into the dangers of the Baltimore dope scene. Game wasn't for you if you weren't from Baltimore and didn't have your people. I wasn't thorough like that to have him on my hip. Me, I could barely cover my own ass. On Greenmount Avenue, where Pac lived, the dude selling dope already saw him as a threat. A young black charismatic male they didn't know and didn't like because he had an it factor they didn't. Young lions can always smell the blood of other young lions in their territory who might present a problem. Pac didn't pay their foolishness any mind. He was focused and becoming known for his brazen rap battles. At 15 and 16, he could freestyle and rhyme you relentlessly into submission. We were each other's biggest fans, going crazy watching each other do what we loved. I loved watching him do rap battles, and he got a kick watching my dance battles. Then there came the inevitable moment when Pac tried to convince me, "You should rap. You be dope, Jada." "I don't know, Pac. Come on, stop being a square. I'll write a rhyme for you." I couldn't refuse, because Pac was so determined to have a female rap battle group. He put me and 2 other girls together and quickly arranged a rap battle for us. Pac wrote my rhyme and made me practice with him every day after school. I was horrible. Pac really tried, saying again and again, "Listen to me." Then he'd rhyme the rhyme for me. Can you imagine? Pac's cadence and style were as dynamic then as when the world got to hear him. And here he was trying to get me to rhyme like him. Please. He just thought my inability to do so was because I was being stubborn. Pac would be like, "What? Is your great-great-great white grandma coming through now? Where is your rhythm? Is you listening to the guitars or something? Get on beat, square." I could never find my cadence, but I went through with the battle, and we won. I got out alive without embarrassing Pac too much, but my rap career ended there. Pac and I were thick as thieves, and we trusted each other completely. even confiding in each other about our love interests. Pac was seemingly falling in love with someone every week, although there was one girl in any given period of time that he was really crazy about. That was the one he couldn't get. He would have his eye on a few, but there was always that one ungettable girl who would take hold of his mind completely, at least for a time. And that was the one who became my assignment. He sent me on missions to put in a good word for him or deliver letters and poems to that one elusive girl in class. On the flip side, when I had an aching crush on a senior, Pac agreed to help me out. John Cole was a visual artist at PSA who wasn't on campus often. Whenever I saw him, I had butterflies. I was so infatuated with him that instead of just introducing myself, I had asked 2 friends to make the introduction in the lunchroom one day. The moment John looked at me, it was as if his eyes pierced into my soul. He was emotionally open yet mysterious. He kept to himself and his art most of the time, and I could feel in him what seemed to be a soft but tortured heart. He was not my usual preference as far as masculine beauty goes. I liked black dudes, straight dudes to be correct. And John Cole was neither. The exact opposite. He was pale white with white blonde hair all over, not yellow blonde, but white blonde. To some, he could have seemed damn near transparent, but in my eyes, he was beautifully handsome. His face and body seemed sculpted like one of those classic Greek statues. He was different, and I was captivated. This was new territory. I wanted Pac to get to know John for me, explaining, he's different. I like that, but I want to make sure he's not on some weird out-of-pocket shit. As soon as I introduced Pac to John, the 2 of them fell into a tight friendship that made it natural for John and me to become romantic. It was unexpected, unforced, and epic. We became the 3 Musketeers. The only thing I tried to keep separate was my street life, not wanting to involve either of them in what was still on a limited scale at this time. I didn't want my worlds to collide. We each had a level of dysfunction and trauma in our lives, but because Pac's life was so marred by poverty, I think he felt the stresses more. Pac stayed with his mom and his sweet baby sister Setua, whom he adored, with his own spot at the back of the house in a makeshift extension. One day I went to pick him up, and he invited me inside. He took me to his room, and I saw that he slept on a tattered mattress on the floor with a sheet thrown over it. The floor was covered by a super thick carpet that looked like it'd never been vacuumed. Me? I could post up in many projects in Baltimore, but Pac's house? Not so much. Pac's living space made the projects feel like the 4 seasons. He grabbed what he needed, gestured to the front of the house, and then he took me to meet his mother. And there, Afeni was, in the dark, as Pac led the way through the very still and heavy space. Over time, I would get to know Afeni and see that many of Tupac's traits were inherited from her. Afeni was brilliant, well-learned, and when she had her mind set, there was no changing it. She had a smile that could light up a room, and when she started to speak about something she was passionate about, it was impossible for her not to get your attention. Pac was the same in every way. All of this shared magic would at times be the grounds for conflict between 2 very intelligent, strong-willed spirits already steeped in their own individual conflicts. "Ma, this is my friend Jada from school," Pac said to Afeni, who sat quietly smoking as the embers of her cigarette lit up the darkness. "Well, hello, Jada. Aren't you pretty?" She said this without celebration, as just a matter of fact. I don't know how to explain it, but I was immediately drawn to her rawness and her lack of desire to be impressed or to impress. "Thank you. Very nice to meet you." "You too, sweetheart." Afeni then turned her attention somewhere else, and I turned to go, following Pac out of the house. After my first visit, I never went back to that house. John, on the other hand, stayed with Pac a couple of times until the rats got a little too close for comfort to the mattress on the floor of Pac's room. Before long, there came a point between the young dealers in his hood targeting him and conflict with his mother when Pac admitted he needed somewhere else to stay. I knew what I had to do and had Pac come with me and wait in the living room as I went to my mother's bedroom to beg. "Ma, just let him stay here tonight. One night. Just one night." "Yes, until we can figure something else out for him." My mother agreed to one night and not one night more. She thought it very inappropriate for a male friend of mine to be staying with us. I didn't care about what was appropriate. Pac wasn't going to be on the street, period. I got him some sheets and a blanket, and he slept peacefully on our couch. The next day, Pac and I explained his situation to John, who instantly offered for Pac to come and stay with him. My anxiety drained from me in a flash. I knew with John, Pac was straight. And thus began a memorable period in each of our lives. John lived with his parents in Bolton Hill, a well-to-do area at the time, not far from school. John's parents loved both Pac and me, which granted us an open door to their home. Pac stayed weeks on end in the spacious upper loft John occupied. And in time, John's home became Pac's official residence. I will forever be grateful to John's parents for allowing their home to be a safe space for us. The closer we became, the more John confided in me about his heartbreak, which had to do with the debilitating stroke his mom had suffered and how it had stolen from him the mother he once knew. Pac and I had lost our mothers to addiction. The three of us were all orphans in some manner. We had lost our mothers in different ways. We were codependent in the best way. We would try to fill in the gaps of one another's losses as much as we could. What the three of us were going through became the glue of our everlasting friendship. I had found a new garden. There was something so liberating about being with a young man as deeply passionate as John. He brought that passion to everything, from the music he was drawn to his desire to help others, to his art, and how he loved. He was also passionate about sharing every aspect of life with Pac and me. He would sometimes go to Odell's with us on North Avenue and lay in the cut while I dance battled. He'd explain later that he rarely got to see me dance because I was always surrounded by a sea of people while he stood posted as the only white dude amid a sea of hustlers. He didn't care. He was down to kick it with Pac and me no matter where we were. Whenever I stepped off the staircase after climbing to John's loft sky, I felt free to be someone other than the Jada I knew. With its beautiful brick walls, high ceilings, and tall windows, his living space was a world full of deep feeling, art, music, and open-hearted conversation. I had my first mushroom experience with John, which was a hell of a ride after I damn near poisoned myself by taking too many. He was a seasoned enthusiast. In fact, much of his artwork was inspired by his shroom journeys. Pac in these days didn't indulge in any heavy mind-altering substances. He smoked weed now and then and drank alcohol once in a while, whereas I could be extreme. We all shared a love of every kind of music. John revolutionized our musical knowledge by introducing us to bands like New Order, This Mortal Coil, The Cure, The Cocteau Twins, Blue Nile, and Dead Can Dance. We all became huge Kate Bush fans, especially Running Up That Hill. In our world together, no subject was taboo. Pac, fiery and eloquent, delivered political sermons to me and John with particular attention to the plight of the Black community. It was in these impromptu forums that I learned about the Black Panther Party. His mother, Afeni, was an ex-Panther, and the teachers who shaped its ideology. Pac taught me so much history I had never known, and he spoke about how that history continued to influence the systemic abuse of power in efforts to destroy Black communities. In these moments, I saw a preview of how Pac could change the molecules in the air around him in ways the world would eventually experience through his music, his movies, his interviews, and above all, his presence. Through Pac, I became enthralled with freedom fighters like Angela Davis, Huey P. Newton, Geronimo Pratt, Assata Shakur, and Elaine Brown. He urged me to read Angela Davis, an autobiography, Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver, Soledad Brother by George Jackson. Marion had given me a foundation in the history of the civil rights movement, but Pac embedded me in the history of Black power, which gave me insight into why my Aunt Karen and my mother approached social inequalities the way they did. Now it all made sense. In my own studies, I noted that there were still gaps in the thinking of both movements that held Black women back, because we were ultimately expected to propel Black men forward. Pac and I had many intense, powerful debates about sexism within the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, and the ridiculousness of how Black men, in fighting for their freedom and autonomy, had a very difficult time believing their women deserved the same freedom and autonomy. This was always deeply disappointing to me, and Pac and I would go at it around this issue. Pac loved women, especially Black women, but he had his hang-ups. I could go as hard as he could, but was more willing to give up my need to be right when he hit me with some potent truths. I can't say Pac gave up his need to be right so easily, but man, I knew how to sit him down. We both cherished our intellectual and passionate exchanges. John was sometimes our audience and oftentimes our student. One day, John and I were out shopping in a store when I realized, in my newfound radical awareness around racism, that a white female clerk had been eyeing me and covertly following me. "Are you following me?" I finally asked. "Excuse me?" I said, "Are you fucking following me?" John immediately ran to my side, smoothed things out, and took me outside the store. "Hey, what's going on?" he gently asked. "You didn't see how she was treating me? She was following me like I was going to steal something. How come she didn't do that to you?" "Why do you think she was following you?" "Because I'm Black, John." John listened silently, but with the deepest empathy. When I was done ranting, he said, "I get it. I'm sorry you experienced that, and I wish you didn't have to." He was so kind, but what we both knew then was that he would never have such experiences. No matter how hard he tried to understand, I knew this would create a chasm between us. That made me question if I could truly consider white men as romantic partners. It was bad enough that most Black men didn't understand the plight of Black women, but to contend with a white man who wouldn't have the ability to get it no matter how hard he tried, which was worse? John could see beyond these things. He operated off of spirit, which dissolved barriers and filled chasms. Things just were. I loved how he had that ability at such a young age. I did not. For the time being, however, I had found a measure of safety in the company of these two remarkable and gifted men, both who loved me in different ways for myself. By the summer of 1987, aspects of my life were starting to crash into each other. The fact that I was starting to move from occasional low-level dealing to selling more often made it difficult to keep my worlds separate. John, who was very persistent, wanted to be with me in my different worlds. He wasn't intimidated or daunted, even as a striking, almost iridescent white dude in the middle of places where he had no business. His fearlessness made me uneasy. I bluntly told him more than once, "Listen, you can't go with me everywhere. I mean, you can't be up on me like that. I'm going to be in places you can't be." He didn't get it. He would just ignore what I said. John thought he could be Mr. United Nations and create a demilitarized zone anywhere he went. He felt comfortable and had no reason to see himself as a possible target. That wasn't going to work with me, especially after the night he dropped me off in his baby blue VW bug, and some dude I knew stepped to him and asked for a ride somewhere with two buddies. John agreed. That was the night that almost got him killed. In an attempt to set John up and rob him, maybe because they thought John was carrying something for me, these dudes got in his car pretending they needed a ride to a part of town he should have never been in. There was quite a saga that followed, but culminated at a red light, with guns from another car pointed at John's passengers, who fled on foot. John took off in the nick of time, barely escaping with his life. Child. The worst part? He wasn't fazed at all. But I was extremely fazed. So much so, I made sure some friends of mine had a word with the dude who started it. John almost got his ass in some shit because of me. Never again. The intersection of our worlds created too much risk. We decided to go our separate ways. But John and I would have a lifelong friendship. Outside of John and Pac, I had homegirls who were like sisters to me. Yet, unlike a lot of female social sets, my girlfriends and I very rarely possed up. We each had our own unique sisterhood. Each of my girlfriends represented different flows and offered me different levels of connection to something important that I needed. Tony, my skating partner, had just moved to Baltimore from New York when I met her at the rink. She was petite like me, with a relaxed demeanor. It didn't hurt that she could skate her ass off, which made a perfect pairing for learning moves and showing out. None of my other girlfriends skated, while Tony and I couldn't get enough of it. We had many adventures, and some misadventures too. One day at Painter's Mill, some rowdy, rough-ass chick squared off on Tony as soon as she skated off the floor. Whatever instigated it, I didn't see. I was still skating. But within a minute or so, I caught the commotion. I peeped the scene quick, and I could tell by the stance of the girl coming at Tony that she was used to fighting boys. She had her right foot back and her left foot forward, hands down, clenched in fists, ready, inching towards Tony as she talked shit. Girls who couldn't really fight would be swinging their fingers in somebody's face, shouting big words with their feet in a parallel stance. That was me for sure. I knew right then we were in trouble. On instinct, I took my skates off in the middle of the rink, ran across the floor, and jumped beside Tony with one skate in hand. These girls were about to whip our asses, but not without a fight. Because I was so small, I didn't adhere to the rule, a fair one. I held my skate tight by the wheels, ready to smash it against the side of this girl's face if shit got stupid. Tony swung, and the girl did a quick lean back, missing the shot like a pro. The girl's reflexes were quick as hell, and just as she was about to lunge towards us, two male skate guards jumped in between us. I was so damn relieved. Scared as I was that day, the rule was, and is, if we come together, your fight is my fight. My girl Fawn and I spent a lot of time together. Tall and pretty like her name, she was a bit older than I was, and had the freedom to move with me however, whenever. She was super quiet and smooth. She didn't know nobody and didn't care to. She was the girlfriend who probably knew the most about my drug activities at that time because I trusted her. She didn't ask questions, so if I got a page and I said, I gotta make this stop real quick, she simply nodded and we rolled. Fawn's home situation was plagued with addiction like mine. Our loneliness and dismal family lives were often cured by each other's company. We both were basically able to come and go as we pleased, and Fawn was always down for whatever. And then there was Ramsey, who went to Baltimore School for the Arts in the Visual Arts Department. Half white and half Japanese, Ramsey's looks strongly favored her Japanese heritage from her paternal side. Being mixed race made for an interesting dynamic with her white family on her maternal side who raised her. She was orphaned too, in a way. Through Ramsey, I was able to witness the racism that Asian American women faced, very different from the racism I faced as a black woman. What she experienced had different nuances and complexities, yet she was as challenged by white supremacy as I was. This was especially the case since she lived right across the street from some members of the KKK. Although we had to deal with all the external realities, Ramsey and I had so much fun together. Rams was super cute, and when she came to my neck of the woods, all the dudes loved her. She looked like your quintessential visual artist with her black turtleneck, black jeans, long black hair, and Capri cigarette in hand. Ramsey was another one who rolled with me anywhere. I had her deep in my streets, and she had me deep in her streets, populated by poor white boys from Pigtown to Highlandtown. And that mix was a weird combination of punk, metal, hip-hop, and drugs. They liked pills and acid. These dudes were in bands and were artists in their own right. Rams introduced me to the hardcore punk scene, with bands I would see at the Loft, a hole-in-the-wall club in her hood. It was full of some of the most gutter, rugged, rough white boys the city had to offer. My homegirl Keisha, who also went to Baltimore School for the Arts, was one friend I couldn't take anywhere because she was a homebody, more or less by choice. Her mother, Geraldine, a dead ringer for Sade and soon-to-be entrepreneur, a caregiver who would build a multi-million-dollar business placing other caregivers, worked as much as my mother did and had the same kind of hours. Keisha didn't like to be alone, so she would sneak her boyfriend in to stay the night with her almost every evening. Sometimes while I was hanging, I'd be inspired to color my hair with the jazzing, semi-permanent color over the top of my platinum blonde and use the bathroom sink, much to the displeasure of Geraldine, who kept the most immaculate house. Luckily, she put up with me ruining her beautiful towels. Being at home with Keisha was a safe place for me to decompress and be still. We'd known each other since middle school, and nobody could get through to me better than Keisha, who was deeply affectionate, loving, and just downright silly. Even when she was serious, Keisha had the brightest smile and the whitest, most perfect teeth. She was obsessed with dental hygiene, like nobody I ever knew. Although I loved hanging with Keisha, I loved being in the streets more, and summertime was the best time for that. Some of my fondest memories are of Fawn and me making our way to Druid Hill Park, one of the oldest public parks in America. There were gardens, waterfalls, and even a zoo where I used to go with my grandfather Grant. But the main attraction in the park every Sunday was like a big old block party that started at high noon and went until dark. You could scope out the dopest cars in the city, driving by in a slow-moving train, and listen to the bangingest sound systems as joints like Paid in Full blasted with thumping bass. All us girls were looking fine as hell. And the dudes, who were the biggest high rollers in the city, always made an appearance. Every feature of a car was up for scrutiny at that event, down to the detail of how well your tires shone. Dashboards, steering wheels, and panels in the car had to be shining. Your car had to be just as fly on the inside as it was on the outside, even down to the tree air fresheners that hung from the rear view in black ice, vanilla, pine, strawberry. To this day, a crisp car that smells good is an aphrodisiac for me. Add to that the smell of a man wearing Dracar Noir. Don't get me started. How you laced your car was an art form, and it was also an indication of your come up for that week. The flyer your car became, the more money you were making. It was also at the park where everyone followed the unwritten rule that there was to be no violence of any kind. It was the only place and the only day when hustlers from all parts of the city could convene and socialize without issues. As soon as dark hit the park, the festivities moved to Northern Parkway in Wabash, where we watched the dopest motorcycles in the city race up and down. Sundays were fun days when the streets took a break from the madness. They were like the hustlers' holy day. It was the cars, motorcycles, hairstyles, nails, bags, and jewelry, how much stuff you had, and the quality of it that were the signs of worth for a community of people who were constantly reminded, you ain't shit, and you ain't never gonna be shit. Watching those cars roll through the park was an inspiration. They were a constant reminder that a prosperous life was possible, and that we deserved the better things life had to offer. Those cars kept many of us hopeful. They may not have guided us to the right path, but they gave us something to reach for instead of giving up on ourselves. I kept all this in mind when I got my first car. Not the one I wanted because, 1, I could never explain to my mom how I could afford such a car. And 2, I rolled in the city at all hours with product and didn't want no smoke from the cops or worse, stick-up crews. Drug money was not the only way to pay for a car, though. By this point, I had already worked my first professional acting job, playing a runaway slave. The short PBS special entitled Freedom Station was about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. In addition to being admitted to the local performers union, I earned about $6,000. With that, I paid cash for my little Nissan Sentra, with the patient understanding that if I played it smart now, one day I could have any car I wanted. In my Nissan, I was the last person you'd suspect of carrying a decent amount of product and pockets full of cash. With my blue or pink or green or platinum blonde hair, I was just the friendly, artsy girl next door who went to Baltimore School for the Arts, and who knew, was one day maybe going to be an actor. The level of sophistication present in the East Coast drug game operating in black neighborhoods during the 1980s to the 90s has rarely been captured in film and TV. The violence of the landscape has been portrayed on screen, but never the intelligence, the ingenuity, and the organized nature of it all. I'm not an expert, and it's a tricky subject to broach because it's actually nothing to brag about. Yet, it was truly a unique era and has yet to be explored enough to show why. What's more, there are some of us in the entertainment world today who were schooled through that street game. We were given lessons that helped us achieve success, legitimately, and made it possible for us to survive different types of jungles. I came across dudes from New York, Philly, and DC who were real deal entrepreneurs and who first introduced me to stocks and the importance of investing money. Many of them owned multiple businesses, sub shops, barber shops, hair salons, body shops, and shoe stores. They were kingpin CEOs who knew how to organize young lions, gain their loyalty, and keep them in check when necessary. I was lucky to come across a few big ballers who took a liking to me, who saw promise in my future beyond the streets, who helped to keep me safe, and who taught me a few things along the way. They showed me the importance of being self-made and that nobody was going to give you your success. They taught me how to hold my own and persevere to get mine. Because I was taught to always keep a legit job, my mother never became suspicious. Ironically, though she didn't know about me, I was aware that she had her own stint selling cocaine in order to support her heroin addiction. The fact that mother and daughter were selling at the same time was indicative of the condition of our world. My legit jobs also ironically helped me make connects with all different kinds of hustlers. When I worked at Merry-Go-Round, they came through to shop for themselves and the women in their lives. The men who were really about their life were confident, had nothing to prove, kept all things close to the chest, and carried an assured stillness that made them a walking secret. And then there were those who were wild, reckless, violent, and unpredictable. And although folks feared them, their days were always numbered. Arrogance, typical of the boastful ones, covered for how insecure they were. This type was always worried about themselves and would throw you under the bus quick. And believe it or not, there were many who had the sweetest heart behind the rugged exterior that shielded their wounds. Hustlers were everywhere. The skating rink, the clubs, the record store, clothing stores, my telemarketing job, a black family-owned candy store at the Harbor Place Mall. All these jobs and the people I met in those settings just helped me cultivate my instincts and better read the inner workings of others. From the moment I met Chet, I wanted to learn everything from him. I liked the way he carried himself and his business. He was on the low, and I knew that was the exact recipe needed for success. As he rose in the game, he became my mentor and my direct connect, though I remained under BP's wing of protection. Chet looked like a nerdy college kid with his light eyes, small frame, and big head, and super cheerful attitude. He would come around in his UPS outfit after work, giving off absolutely no impression that he was, in fact, a drug dealer. At the time, Chet was the only dealer I knew on his level who had an actual job, giving him a legit-looking appearance of being the guy next door. He did not carry a tough guy killer persona. I don't think I ever even saw Chet with a gun. Ever. Chet would also be the first millionaire I actually knew. My first goal of having an acting career became secondary as I was now under the illusion that I could become a bona fide queenpin. The timing was right. B-More was a hub for the drug trade. A lot of product flowed in and out of our city. Much of the product was coming in via traffickers in Florida, California, and at times New York, although New York was tricky because of secondhand sales that cut into profit. One of the means of bringing in drugs was through independent truckers or small truck companies that could move large-scale shipments. Kilos of coke were sometimes packed inside the lining of huge concert-sized speakers put into these trucks. Once they were delivered to a warehouse, the speakers were taken apart, unpacked, and the bricks were ready to distribute. The amounts in shipments ranged from 20 to 100 kilos. The truckers were paid based on the distance they had to drive and how much product they were transferring, 500 to 1,000 per kilo for delivery. Laundry detergent boxes were another method to disguise product. The product had to be vacuum sealed before you put the soap powder back into the box. Cars were also used and packed to the hilt full of drugs, door panels, motors, inside the seats, spare tires, and even the tires on the car. Once the car was unloaded, it was a clean and free title card to be used however the receiving party wanted. Often, it would be side chicks who got those cars. Over time, more sophisticated methods developed to ship larger quantities of drugs. Legitimate companies were formed to disguise drug shipments, like, say, a pool and spa equipment wholesaler that used hot tubs to transport product. All kinds of companies sprang to life to conduct illegal business. Other practices were developed to deal with the large amounts of money that had to be moved to pay for all this product coming in. A common system was the use of money orders to pay off smaller debts up to $100,000. Someone would get paid about $2,000 a day to run around all over the city and purchase 100 money orders for $1,000 each without being flagged. Then these money orders were placed inside the pages of magazines to be shipped for payment of the product sent. Another method was tampons. Once the boxes were purchased, the tampon wrappers would be carefully removed and the actual tampon replaced with tightly rolled money, which was then placed in the wrappers to be resealed and repacked in the box. And to make it all full circle, sometimes the same speakers used to deliver product were flipped to house large amounts of cash to be shipped back to the distributor. When I think about this now, I don't know what made me think that I had what it took to play in this province of wolves. It wasn't long before I learned that kittens don't have no business trying to play with beasts. That said, I believed I could defy the odds by making my mark my way. And when I found a spot in Cherry Hill where nobody was selling, for good reasons it turned out, I was able to convince BP to help me set up shop. His reaction? Damn, shawty. I never even thought about that. The last place anyone would think I'd be was hustling in the zombie zone at the bottom of Cherry Hill. This was another crash course in navigation. Cherry Hill in southwest Baltimore, close to downtown, was an area that was on a peninsula surrounded by water and did not operate like the rest of the city. There was only one way in and one way out, a death trap for my line of business. If you got twisted up on the dead-end side streets off the main drag, you could get trapped, get got, and get forgotten about. You rarely saw a police car, which made this territory basically lawless. Although that had its advantages, of course, as I was able to roll in and out with product and money and no concern about the law. On the other hand, I had to worry about the wolves who also had no concern for the law. All this made for a unique and dangerous dynamic, but I saw opportunity. The top of Cherry Hill was on the main strip, where there was a convenience store, a barber shop, a sub shop, and some other spots. This is where the majority of hustlers worked. In contrast, the bottom, where I wanted to be, was desolate. There was this small apartment complex, and I felt there was a lot of money to be made from residents who otherwise had to go to the top to be served. Whereas others may have viewed my location at the bottom of Cherry Hill as a no-go, I saw a golden egg. And as one of the first to tap into this underserved population, I turned out to be right. BB had respect in Cherry Hill, and I was protected under his wing. He knew the dangers so well, he gave me a .22 for just in case. I set up shop inside a woman's first-floor apartment where I served folks out of her window and sometimes through her door with the chain on it. Everything ran smoothly for a while. My pockets were fuller than ever. It felt good to be able to share a bit of my financial freedom with my girlfriends and other women whom I might not have been tight with, but who needed help to get out of a sticky situation. Chet and I liked sharing with people in our community, Robin Hood style, easing struggles where we could. Sometimes we would be in the supermarket and notice a single mother with children or an elderly person alone, and straight out pay for all their groceries just because we could. There was so much suffering in our environment, and it never really occurred to us that we were adding to it. King's Dominion was the first thing out of my mouth. Spring was in the air in 1988, and my mother had just announced that her boyfriend Rodney and future husband wanted to take us to the amusement park a couple of hours away. Adrian loved amusement parks, everything about them, and she was so cheerful when she said, "Rodney wants to take us to King's Dominion. Do you want to go? I think it would be fun." I deliberated for a bit, but could feel her enthusiasm as she went on about what a great time the three of us could have together. I have to admit, I wasn't that interested in hanging with an adult crew for the day, but Rodney was cool, and more importantly, it would make my mother happy. I agreed on one condition. I'll go if I can take Pac. It was a road trip, and Pac and I both needed to get out of the city and to have some fun. During this time, Pac was busy working a job John had helped him get after school and on weekends. He was creating a vision for his future and was flourishing creatively, although, as he came into his manhood, he was frustrated he couldn't do more to help his mother and his sister. He felt like he was failing as a man, and he was hard on himself, because in his mind, he had to live up to a standard in providing for the ones he most loved. As often as I could, I'd tell him, "Your day will come, Pac. Be patient. There's only so much you can do right now." In time, I assured him, he'd be able to do more to help his family. I said that to him because I believed this to be true in my own circumstance with my mother. My idea was, if I save myself, it'll make it possible for me to save her too. Pac had never been to King's Dominion, so he was happy to join us. Besides, Pac was always down for a good time. As soon as we entered the park, Rodney dug into his pocket to load us up with cash. He obviously didn't know I had my own money, which was best, because that would have made for a much different conversation. Rodney suggested we reconvene later at an agreed-upon spot, and with that, Pac and I bounced. Of course, we got on rides and ate a ton of junk like cotton candy, my favorite, hot dogs, and french fries. At some point, we wandered over to an installation where you could pick out a song by your favorite artist to make a music video of yourself lip-syncing to it, against a green screen. "Pac, we gotta make our own music video. We gotta do one," I said excitedly. He looked at the list of artists, all pop stars. Pac was hesitant. "They don't have nobody black." I scoured the long list. "Hold up. They have Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince." "Where?" Skeptical Pac looked again. I pointed. "Here. Parents just don't understand." Pac smiled. "They the only rappers on here." Damn. I don't know all the lyrics to that song. Do you? I shrugged, saying, "Nope. But parents is cool. We know enough to fake it." My thing was, any chance I had to perform, I took it. And that day, I also had an opportunity to have it on tape. Pac was feeling a little self-conscious because he didn't know all the lyrics. It had already been established that I couldn't rap, so I had the easy job. All I needed to do was be his backup dancer. We went back and forth, but he finally gave in. And the rest is history. The universe loves to sprinkle prophetic teasers into our lives. All the time. Not in a million years would I have dreamed that I had just made a video lip-syncing the brand new hit song that would go on to win a Grammy as one of the first in a newly created Best Rap Song category. Not in a million years would I've dreamed that the Fresh Prince and I would become, very well acquainted. And I never would have imagined that this video would become a tangible memory of the last time Pac and I were simply kids together. One morning, a very short time later, without warning, other than the knowledge that there were difficult struggles within Pac's family life, I arrived at school, went to my locker, and found a letter from him in which Pac broke the news that he had left for California. I would come to find out he had gone to Donald Hicken days before to try to find a way to stay. Pac kept this whole dilemma from me. His exit was abrupt, very abrupt, and that made me worry. Although he assured me in the letter that he was okay and that he would be in touch with me soon, my deep concern for his well-being overshadowed the fact that he was gone from Baltimore for good. When we finally spoke, he let me know he was okay. He's moving around from place to place, but he was safe. He got me up to speed on why, but it was complicated. He did his best to ease my hurt feelings about his sudden departure and my desire to make shit right for him. I hated the fact that I was absolutely powerless to make his life easier. Pac gave me addresses and numbers for whenever I needed to reach him in Marin City, out in the Bay Area of the West Coast, and kept talking about how he thought I would love Cali and how he wanted me to visit. I promised I would, and meant it. Most of our conversations ended with a familiar refrain of his. Hey, don't get into no stupid shit. I don't want to have to jump back on a bus to Baltimore Square. He'd say it like the world was an easy place when we both knew it wasn't, just to reassure me that no matter where he was still willing to hold me down. I wouldn't give myself the room to feel his absence. I had to keep it moving. I just kept on stepping deeper and deeper into the shit that I believed was going to be my way out of it all. It's a warm Friday night, late spring 1988, that begins with Ramsey and me on North Avenue at a corner liquor store. Ramsey is a senior at BSA and about to graduate. We're looking to kick it as much as possible before she goes off to college. So the plan is to get a bottle of peach schnapps and head down to the harbor and hang. Before I can buy peach schnapps, I have a check for $700 from a hair modeling job that I need to cash real quick. I'm in line when I notice this really tall dude in a white t-shirt and jeans standing behind me. The person in front of me leaves, so I walk up to the bulletproof plexiglass that the cashier is behind. I ask for schnapps and ask the dude to cash my check after I sign the back of it. He slides my cash toward me underneath the glass, and I grab it. Just as I'm about to put the money in the top pocket of my jeans jacket, the tall dude behind me snatches my $700 fucking dollars right out of my hand and dashes out the door. The last thing I expect is for a joker to reach over me and rob me like that. That's what I get for being short. Out of pure instinct and rage, I whip around and charge after that dude, out of the store and down the alley. As I'm chasing him at top speed, I grab my switchblade out of my upper jacket pocket, flick it open, and do my best to catch his ass. All I can think is, how dare you snatch my shit? Not tonight, nigga. Not tonight. Ramsey's watching at the top of the alley, screaming after me. Jada! No! I'm out of my mind, and she can see that trying to stop me is a losing effort. The guy's tall as hell, with long legs. The further ahead he gets, the madder I get. Clearly, I am not gonna catch him. So I stop and try to catch my breath as I walk back toward Ramsey. Once I reach her, she's pissed. If you had caught him, what were you gonna do? She asks, irritated. I was gonna put this knife in his back and rip out that nigga's spine. Yeah, right. He could have killed you. Something is really wrong with you, Ramsey says with a slightly relieved chuckle. We went back to the spot and got our peach schnapps and went down to the harbor, hanging out and drinking until it got really late. The late spring night was so nice. It was evenings like this that made me fall in love with the East Coast warm nights forever. The pleasure of being outside and hanging on nights like this was something I wanted to hold on to as long as possible. We were having such a good time, as usual whenever we were together, and I felt like whatever problems were in our way were nothing. Then, unbelievably, who do I see? Yep, homeboy, who took my shit across the street. Same jeans, same shoes, same white t-shirt, just mobbing like shit ain't happened earlier. But he doesn't see me. In this moment, I have to make a choice. For several beats, I look at him, contemplating whether I should go confront this dude. What I realize is, without that rush of adrenaline, I don't have the same courage I had in the alley. Note taken. I gotta stop being so damn impulsive. It's gonna get me hurt. I tell myself, turn the other way and just leave it alone. I do just that and continue my laughs with Ramsey. Despite the earlier events, this night gave me a lasting memory of the carefreeness of my youth. In the midst of everything, with the overt violence and the undertow, there was beauty, love, and deep friendship among these lessons I was learning at the University of the Bmore Streets, Advanced. And considering all the other choices and circumstances that lay ahead for me, this was a very good Friday night in a city where you had to be more careful because you were in Murderland now, not Maryland. Welcome.